The sun rose mercilessly over the sprawling expanse of Calipatria State Prison, casting long, jagged shadows across the cracked concrete and razor wire fences. Nestled 184 feet below sea level in Imperial County, California, the prison has earned its nickname as the lowest prison in the Western Hemisphere. Here, the desert sun beats down with a harshness that mirrors the lives of thousands confined within its walls. On this particular morning, the yard, an expanse of cracked concrete dotted with faded basketball courts and exercise equipment, was beginning to fill with inmates emerging for their daily outdoor time. The air shimmered with heat and tension, a thick, almost tangible presence that made the dust in the yard hang in slow motion. At precisely 10:20 a.m., the clatter of inmate boots echoed across the yard as men shuffled toward their designated spots. There were 3,800 inmates crammed into the facility, their movements choreographed yet uneasy, each man navigating the invisible currents of hierarchy and gang affiliation. Every glance, every nod, and every step carried meaning. In this yard, nothing was casual. One misstep could erupt into violence. One wrong look could be interpreted as a challenge. The sun reflected off chain-link fences and the metal edges of guard towers, a constant reminder that freedom here was an illusion. Among the incoming inmates was 31-year-old Alex Mercado, a lifer from Los Angeles County, serving time for armed robbery. He walked with a cautious awareness, scanning the yard for threats, measuring the distance between himself and the clusters of men who ran the informal economies of prison life, protection payments, drug trades, and gang allegiances. Mercado's past decisions had earned him enemies. Rumors of debts unpaid and perceived betrayals circulated quietly, but with the weight of deadly potential. His eyes, sharp and calculating, caught familiar faces in the crowd, each one a variable in the dangerous calculus of survival. Across the yard, Gonzalez, 26, and Javier Torres, 27, positioned themselves strategically near the far fence. Gonzalez, serving a life sentence for murder, was hardened by years behind bars, while Torres, recently returned from Kern County after parole, carried a history of assault and intimidation. Torres had fashioned a shank from scavenged metal, its edge sharpened to lethality. He kept it hidden beneath his sleeve, a silent instrument of the violence he had been contemplating. Between them, a quiet exchange and nod, a subtle tilt of the head, confirmed that plans were already in motion, though the broader yard remained oblivious. The yard itself is a study in controlled chaos. Correctional officers patrol elevated walkways, radios at the ready, scanning the crowd for signs of trouble. But despite their vigilance, they cannot control the undercurrents of resentment, ambition, and survival instinct that ripple among the inmates. In this environment, alliances are as fragile as glass, and grudges are rarely forgotten. Prison life, in its purest form, is about reading these currents, calculating risks, and navigating the delicate balance between visibility and vulnerability. Mercado moved toward a central area of the yard, walking past groups clustered around basketball games and makeshift workout stations. His steps were measured, but the weight of his awareness pressed down like the relentless sun. Around him, conversations and laughter masked the simmering tension, a thin veil over the dangerous intentions lying in wait. The heat of the desert air pressed against every face, making even ordinary movement an effort. Each man in the yard was aware of his surroundings, and in this awareness lay both survival and vulnerability. As Mercado adjusted his path, he passed Torres, who gave nothing away but carried the promise of violence in his movements. Gonzalez lingered nearby, muscles taut, eyes scanning. The subtle choreography of predator and prey had already begun, unnoticed by the officers above. In this environment, time moves differently. A single moment, a glance, a step, a word, can be the difference between life and death. For Mercado, the exercise yard was both a place of routine and a theater of unpredictability. Inmates who survived long in Calipatria learned to trust instinct over assumption, to watch not only their own movements but the shifts in others. And yet, no one is truly safe. Within this sun-baked expanse, surrounded by walls that cut off the horizon, the microcosm of prison life is defined by hierarchy, reputation, and the constant, gnawing threat of violence. The guards' voices crackled over radios as the morning progressed, the sound barely noticeable against the backdrop of footfalls, shouting and the hiss of wind through chain-link fences. Inmates continued their routines. Some stretched, some jogged, some gathered in small circles, but beneath the ordinary motions lay a silent tension. The sun, high now and casting a blinding glare, illuminated every corner, yet shadows remained, hiding intentions and concealing threats. In the heart of this yard, Mercado's life was about to intersect violently with forces that had been moving unseen. The delicate balance of power, respect, and fear was poised on the edge of rupture. In Calipatria, every movement counts. Every glance is loaded. Every choice carries consequences, often immediate and fatal. And as Mercado walked, unaware that his moment of confrontation was near, the sun continued to beat down, casting long, unrelenting shadows over a yard where survival is a gamble, and where one wrong step can mean the difference between life and death. The morning air in Calipatria's exercise yard was heavy with heat and tension. Inmates moved deliberately, the rhythm of the yard governed by unspoken rules, invisible hierarchies, and past grudges. Every glance carried weight. Every movement was scrutinized. Among these men, the smallest slight could ignite violence, and the faintest whisper could signal threat. Alex Mercado, walking cautiously toward the center of the yard, felt this weight pressing down. The rumors about him, allegedly skimming protection money from Torres' crew, had already circulated to the prison grapevine, invisible yet powerful. Across the yard, Gonzalez and Javier Torres waited, their presence understated but ominous. Torres concealed a shank fashioned from scavenged metal, sharpened to a deadly edge. It was not just a weapon but a statement, planned, deliberate, and patient. Gonzalez, with his life sentence and hardened prison experience, knew exactly when to strike. Together, they represented a threat born of calculated retribution, the kind that emerges from the harsh codes governing prison life. Mercado moved, alert yet unaware that he was being watched so closely. The yard, sun-baked and desolate, seemed almost still, though hummed with the latent energy of men trained in survival. Others carried on, playing basketball, stretching, or pacing, their own routines masking the silent preparation unfolding near the fence. To the untrained eye, nothing appeared out of the ordinary. To those familiar with prison yard dynamics, the tension was palpable, like the air before a storm. The spark ignited suddenly, without warning. Gonzalez lunged, pinning Mercado against a chain-link fence. The attack was swift, precise, and merciless. Torres struck next, the shank piercing flesh with calculated force. Mercado gasped, clutching at his abdomen, the shock of betrayal flashing across his eyes. Blood blossomed quickly, dark and vivid against the pale concrete. The yard, once a controlled expanse, became a scene of chaos. Shouts, running footsteps, and the sharp, metallic smell of violence filling the air. Correctional officers responded immediately, their radios crackling commands as they rushed toward the fray. Chemical agents hissed and shouts echoed across the yard, yet the attack had already reached its brutal conclusion. Mercado was pulled from the ground, but his injuries were catastrophic. Paramedics arrived, transporting him swiftly to the outside hospital, where despite the efforts of medical staff, he was pronounced dead at 11:46 a.m. CDSR, CA.gov. The aftermath left the yard in a suspended silence, a stark contrast to the violence that had erupted moments before. Gonzalez and Torres were immediately secured and transferred to solitary confinement, their faces impassive, the consequences of their actions already setting in. One improvised weapon had been recovered, the tool of death now evidence in an official investigation. No staff were injured, but the psychological imprint of the attack would linger long after the yard emptied. Prison whispers quickly assigned motive: gang retribution. Mercado had allegedly failed to pay dues to Torres' crew, a perceived betrayal in a system where respect, loyalty, and currency often determine life or death. In the microcosm of the prison, these codes are absolute. Failure is not forgiven. Disputes are settled swiftly and violently. Outside the walls, Mercado's family received a phone call that would shatter their world. Your son is gone. The bureaucratic language of the notification contrasted sharply with the horror of the act. Inside, the investigation was already underway. The California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, in coordination with the Imperial County District Attorney, began collecting evidence, interviewing witnesses and reviewing security footage. But for those in the yard, the reality was immediate and inescapable. The ledger had been balanced with blood. The attack highlighted the precarious ecosystem of Calipatria. Double-celled units, understaffing, and a spike in inmate violence throughout 2025 had created an environment where such events, while shocking, were tragically foreseeable. Every yard hour was a gamble, every interaction a potential trigger. Inmates learned quickly. Survival depended on awareness, caution, and sometimes sheer luck. And as the desert sun beat down on the blood-stained concrete, it illuminated a simple, grim truth. In Calipatria State Prison, control is fragile, loyalty is deadly, and one misstep, real or perceived, can end a life in an instant. Mercado had learned this lesson too late, and the yard would remember his fate long after the officers and investigators left. Inside Calipatria State Prison, the walls themselves seemed to hum with tension. Concrete corridors stretched endlessly, punctuated by barred doors, narrow windows, and the faint metallic smell of disinfectant and sweat. Here, life is measured not in hours, but in calculated movements and constant awareness. The death of Alex Mercado in the exercise yard sent ripples through every cell block, reverberating far beyond the immediate scene. For the guards and staff, the homicide was another reminder of the fragile balance they managed daily. Correctional officers patrolled elevated walkways, radios in hand, eyes scanning for the slightest irregularity. Despite their vigilance, the sheer scale of the population, 3,800 inmates, and complexity of gang alliances meant that control was always partial, temporary. In a yard where one misstep could trigger violence, even the most attentive officer could not anticipate every move. The internal prison economy is harsh and precise. Protection payments, contraband exchanges, and informal hierarchies govern life inside. Mercado had allegedly failed to pay dues owed to Torres' crew, a minor infraction in ordinary terms, but serious offense in the code that dictates survival here. In prison, respect is currency, and a perceived slight can quickly escalate into retribution. Gonzalez and Torres acted not on impulse alone, but on a calculated understanding of that code. Violence, in this microcosm, is a tool, a method of asserting power and settling scores. As investigators moved in, the mechanics of confinement took center stage. Torres and Gonzalez were immediately placed in restricted housing, their cells stripped of privileges, a temporary containment to prevent further incidents. Witnesses were interviewed, evidence cataloged, and the shank recovered from the yard was secured. The CDCR, working with the Imperial County District Attorney's Office, opened a formal homicide investigation, reviewing security footage, inmate statements, and guard reports. Every angle was examined, yet within the walls, the social consequences of the attack were already in motion. For the inmates, the yard is both battleground and stage. The memory of Mercado's attack became a warning, a signal that debts and disrespect carry real consequences. Alliances shifted subtly, whispers circulated in stairwells and common areas, and men recalculated their own positions in the hierarchy. In this environment, awareness is survival. The smallest misstep, a glance, a word, a mispayment, can tip the balance from life to death. Outside the prison, Mercado's family grappled with shock and grief. A phone call, formal and detached, communicated the unimaginable. Their son was dead. The bureaucracy of the system contrasts sharply with the raw human cost, the bloodshed in the yard, and the sudden absence of a life. Calipatria itself, with its subsea elevation and relentless desert heat, is designed for containment, not comfort. Overcrowding, double-celling, and understaffing exacerbate tensions. Each yard hour becomes a calculated risk. Every corridor and open space is charged with potential conflict. And yet, life continues. Guards maintain schedules, inmates move through routines, and the prison hums with a slow, unyielding rhythm of survival under harsh conditions. In the aftermath, one truth is clear. The walls of Calipatria contain more than bodies. They contain a system of power, fear, and consequences. In this environment, justice is immediate, brutal, and personal, and for Alex Mercado, the consequences were final. The air in Calipatria State Prison remained thick with tension even after the immediate violence had ended. In the yard, the echo of shouts and the metallic clang of the shank's retrieval had faded, but the memory of Alex Mercado's final moments lingered like a shadow. Guards moved methodically, securing the area and ensuring no further incident erupted. But for the inmates, the attack was already part of the yard's collective consciousness, a grim reminder of how quickly order can collapse. Mercado's body had been transported to an outside hospital, but his fate was sealed. At 11:46 a.m., the Imperial County coroner pronounced him dead. CDCR.gov, Gonzalez and Torres, the assailants, were immediately placed in restricted housing. Face stoic, stripped of privileges. The shank recovered at the scene was cataloged as evidence, a tangible trace of the violence that had erupted in broad daylight. The California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, working with the Imperial County District Attorney's Office, launched a formal investigation. Security footage was reviewed, witness statements collected, and reports filed. Yet, within the walls of Calipatria, the investigation was only one layer of reality. The social consequences of Mercado's death had already rippled through the prison. Gang hierarchies subtly shifted. Whispers of loyalty, betrayal, and survival circulated among the inmates. Each man recalculated his position, aware that the yard's ledger had been balanced and that the system of respect and retaliation was unyielding. Outside the prison, Mercado's family received a call that would change their lives. "Your son is gone." The words came flat, almost bureaucratic, yet carrying the weight of a sudden, irreversible loss. Grief mixed with shock, leaving them to navigate a system that moves slowly, while the prison world moves with deadly efficiency. The incident underscored the challenges inherent in Calipatria and other California prisons. Overcrowding, double-celling, and understaffing create conditions where violence can erupt with little warning. For the staff, it was a reminder of the fragility of control. For the inmates, a demonstration of the consequences of unpaid debts and perceived betrayal. And for Mercado, the price of missteps was fatal, leaving a yard, a facility, and a family to reckon with the aftermath. Alex Mercado's life was more than the headlines of a violent incident. It was the story of a young man caught between choices, circumstance, and a system that often leaves little room for redemption. Before Calipatria, Mercado was a son, a brother, someone with dreams and relationships, abruptly interrupted by poor decisions in a justice system that demanded accountability. His death in the prison yard on November 10th, 2025, is not only a statistic. It is a human life lost, a family left to grieve, and a stark reminder of the fragility of life behind bars. In the days following his death, friends and family remembered him for the person he was beyond the prison walls. Stories emerge of his humor, his loyalty, and his quiet determination to survive the circumstances he was dealt. Mercado's mother, father, and siblings are left with memories and the haunting finality of a call that delivered devastating news. Your son is gone. Within that call lies every parent's worst fear and every family's unimaginable loss. Within Calipatria, Mercado's death served as both warning and legacy. The yard remained a place of tension and survival, but the echoes of his final moments lingered in hushed conversations and solemn reflections among inmates and staff alike. In a system plagued by overcrowding, understaffing, and violence, his life and death serve as a humanizing moment, a reminder that behind every incident, every statistic, and every headline is a person who mattered. While the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation continues its investigation into the homicide, the broader reflection is clear. Reform, accountability, and vigilance are crucial to preventing further loss. Each incident, like Mercado's, underscores the urgent need for better oversight, rehabilitation programs, and support systems that prioritize human life, safety, and dignity even in the harshest environments. Alex Mercado's story is a call to remember the humanity behind every prison number. Families grieve silently, communities reckon with systemic failings, and institutions are challenged to confront the conditions that make such tragedies possible. If you are moved by this story, consider supporting organizations that advocate for prison reform, inmate safety, and family support. Share the story to raise awareness. And remember the victims, not just as names, but as human beings whose lives mattered. Let Alex Mercado's life and tragic death be a reminder. We must act to make change, because every life counts.